Oh, true. Well, maybe. He's here. Nick is here. Decorate with a lot of box markers. Lots of funny ones. Oh, fun thought.
Yeah, no more.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, super good.
Eric, hold up, aren't you good, Eric?
Good. You're the man now.
No, it's the best.
Rain here last night.
It rained real briefly. But there was more lightning than rain, which is cool.
Yeah, we had a wild lightning rainstorm up in Wakaka
Yeah.
last night.
Hey, man.
That's tonight. You don't have a juicy agenda.
No. Just talking.
Good thing I got back in town in time when have a forum.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll get this. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Know exactly what to do when not to be heard.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we're packing it in now.
Bummed about the news, Alice.
Yeah, I'll see you later.
Damn. You're always all around. Yeah, they get you. Mhm, okay.
Does long range mean like geographic distance or temporally? Got it. Got it.
Where are you going?
Here's work paperwork.
Oh, the county. Okay, yeah.
Oh, from Portland? You're gonna let go of the place here? Yeah. Well, yeah, there's that. Get that. Well, you will be dearly missed.
All right. 5:30, we ready to roll? We got
I'm
enough people
ready.
here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Planning Commission meeting July 7th, 2022. I call this meeting to order, 5:30 PM. May, Paula, may we please have the roll call?
Here.
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 There.
I can't hear you,
Okay.
but I am here.
Accounted for. Okay, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next is the approval of the agenda. If everyone has reviewed the agenda, and if someone would care to make a motion to approve it, please do so.
Get motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Excellent. That has been motioned and seconded. All in favor to approve that motion, raise your right hand, and say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Election of an officer. Can someone, do we need to elect a vice chair? Okay, how do we go about this again?
Ask for nomination. To close their nomination.
Would anyone care to nominate someone or themselves as vice chair? We do have to have a vice chair, correct? Okay, gotta have one. I can't nominate myself. Because, you know,
2 chairs.
yeah. Can't be me.
I nominate you.
Are you recording all this silence?
Sometimes.
Oh, that's not.
That seems cruel.
Yeah, that's. not
That's, yeah, that'd be tough. Carly, I'm gonna nominate you too.
I'm going to decline. I already have too much responsibility.
Okay.
What's
Nick,
it- What's it entail?
the
Somebody,
vice chair entails doing my job when I'm not here.
Guidance on, I spend time with Cody. We spend time with Cody every meeting. Prior to every meeting, we get him a meeting script. We run through the agenda. So you will have assistance from staff.
is it assumed that if the chair, for any reason, stops being the chair, the vice chair becomes the chair?
Until a replacement, until we have a vote for the chair again.
Yeah.
Which is what happened to Cody a few months back.
Right.
Yeah.
I would nominate myself, but I'm gone from the country for 2-3 months out of the year, so I don't know if that's a good idea.
What time of the year usually?
yeah, which months?
Winter usually.
We don't have that much going on in the winter usually.
Yeah, there's typically not much going on in the winter anyway. Let's see what Nick says. Nick, would you like to be nominated for vice chair?
Not particularly. I like the idea of Phil doing it.
I like the idea of Nick doing it.
All right.
Split it, Nick.
Yeah, there you
right?
go. You could be vice chair.
The
On the,
assistant to the assistant manager.
yes, this is the assistant manager of the vice chair.
Okay. I'll do it.
Okay, all right. Philip Masher has nominated himself to be vice chair. All in favor of is it Masher or Masher? Philip Masher is nominated, I'm sorry, Philip Masher has nominated himself to be vice chair. All in favor of nominating Commissioner Masher to be vice chair, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
That's it. Okay.
Do I get a crown?
Yeah, we'll get you one. Yeah. Okay, approval of the minutes from the June 16th, 2022 meeting. If everyone has reviewed those minutes from that previous meeting and would care to make a motion to approve those minutes, please do so.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting from June 16th.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
That approval of minutes is a motion and seconded. All in favor to approve the minutes from the June 16 meeting, 2022, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. It is unanimous. Now is the time for public comment. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject that does not later appear in the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Is there any member of the public here that would care to comment on anything? Yes. Hi. When you come up, please just state your name and your address and then go for it. You got 5 minutes.
Sorry. Okay. I'm Jennifer Dewey and my address is 383 Summit Ridge. I got a letter last week about the development that's going on behind on West 7th behind the new proposed plan for Macaque, that development. And I got a letter saying that they are looking to subdivide that lot now. And so my concern is when I look at the agenda, one of the items for discussion is the text amendments. And when I looked at the, I forget what it's called, but like the amendment for that shows what the discussion was. It's in reference to density housing and density plans for the future. I don't know exactly what's going to be planned in that proposed plan for that. But what was laid out to the public before when it originally got dedicated out there was for Macaque's housing center. And it was only one unit. It was not, and with shelter housing. I didn't realize this was made such a difference. Sorry. But subdividing it, I would like to, as people that are going to be bordering that location, everything, I would like to know what the plan is and what the plan is for what the reasoning is for the subdivision. Because those lots back there currently are empty, but the ones that are connecting to are larger parcels. So it doesn't make sense to have two smaller parcels and then depending on what the use is for it would be interesting to know because it's real vague when it goes out. So my concern is on there with the stuff that you guys are going to be referencing later on. That directly impacts that. And it directly impacts what the plan is for the shelter housing or any other permanent low-income housing that may be provided in there. And none of that's been laid out for housing or anything like that.
Got it. So you noticed that there was an application to subdivide that is within some.
Oh, it's directly next to me.
So that it is in the plan department. Got notice to neighbors, which is you.
Yep.
The application process, I believe at some point will likely, if it's subdivision and doesn't, well, subdivision is probably going to come before the planning commission anyway, not necessarily.
Josh Chandler responded to this. We do have a replat request
Okay.
in, and it is a staff level decision. And so I'll have Josh give you some more details.
Okay, real quick, Josh, before we do it, is that all the info that you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, I will be submitting because I have until the 12th to submit my either for or against it. And I am against it. So I will be submitting that letter, but I also want more clarification on what the actual plan is, what they're wanting to put in there. And because by the time it gets sent out, there's already been a plan put out for the subdivision. Because I'm sure that there's a reason for it. So I want to know that. And I think the neighbors should know that as well. Because it will directly impact everybody there.
Okay.
So.
Well, I think Josh will be able to.
Yeah, so the notification that was sent out was for a replat, which currently there's 2 properties there. And the plan is to move the property line between the 2, creating no more lots. It's not a subdivision because it's really just realigning property lines that are out there.
Okay, so does that mean it's actually, because in the picture that I had on the paper, and I should have brought it, but I didn't, it shows 2 plots and then there's one that comes in like an L behind it. Is that to combine them into one? Are they currently 2 now, or are they 1 now?
Currently 2 now. And what the plan is, it will basically be taking the whole entire area and cutting it in half with a rear lot and a front lot. And so it's just moving the line, no creation of lots whatsoever.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, why would you, what's the reasoning for wanting to do that?
So as you know, McCack has acquired the property, or they own the property, and they will be, yes, they will be developing a navigation center and some pallet shelter buildings on the site and the sites, and they needed to reconfigure the property line in order to accommodate that development. I need to let you know this, there is a process that's allowed through state law now that allows this development to occur outside of a land use decision. And we should get this so I can turn my screen on. Outside of a land use decision, and the applicant, after this lot division or lot line adjustment process is concluded, will be seeking approval through this state mandated process to develop the pallet shelters and the navigation center through the allowance allowed by state law that allows these types of developments to come in without going through a land use process. And they just have to submit an application to the city. We check a few boxes and then it gets approved and built. So.
Right. But so the plan that was laid out that was put in the paper, and when I spoke to gentleman at McCack, he came out and the way this layout is that you guys are proposing on there, that back 1.5 acres is going to be vacant. And so, but in the plans that were laid out on the paper and stuff, it doesn't appear that way. It appears that the whole thing. So what is the plan for that back 1.5 acres is my question, I guess.
I don't know that. So we'd be happy to talk to you. You can have a look at what it is they're proposing and the records that we have in our office right now that's been submitted. And you can also run that by Kenny LaPointe, who's the point person for the project.
Okay.
No, I don't think there is anything proposed for that
Okay.
back portion at this time.
I have a question. What's the address of this property and what's it zoned
Right
for?
next to the movie theater.
Oh,
And right
okay.
behind, right next to Coastal and right behind Motel 6 and right behind Ray Schulten's Motors.
Okay, so that area is commercial, isn't it? Yeah, okay.
You may have a point. You mentioned that there's this new policy. Sorry, I'm not right. So there's this new state process that is being laid out. So the only requirement is for them to submit the plan to the city, and that that the city then just has to ensure that the minimum qualifications, whatever the state law laid out, are met.
Mhm.
So is there any recourse for citizens to what is the recourse in the law or feedback from the community? Is it just expected that the agency that's submitting is going to accept feedback from the committee, or is there a formal process?
There is not a formal process through our land use code. It needs to meet our zoning requirements, and we'll be doing a check for that, but it specifically is exempted from a land use process through our code. And it's
So when you say exempted from land use process, that means nobody can contest it. I mean, it can go forward no matter what, as long as it gets approved.
But my research is it's appealable to the circuit court, but not through the Land Use Board of Appeals or for the city council or planning commission. So,
I'm just gonna assume the idea being is that whoever legislation was to take some decision makings out of the local agencies.
that's correct. It was to address the housing crisis in the state and to allow these emergency housing shelter units to be placed anywhere in the urban growth boundary, provided it meets certain requirements. And so that's the way the law reads. This law will sunset on June 30th or July 1, 2023.
It's like an emergency type.
That's correct.
So property owner's position, what would you suggest the best recourse to provide feedback? Since it sounds like this may not be the right avenue.
I'm happy to talk to Ms. Dewey. We are willing to do that and share the information that we have because it is a public record. As far as your recourse or I would have a lot of contact with Kenny Lapointe to the extent that you feel comfortable with that. And then, just spread the word, but we're not, there isn't a public notice requirement per se with this application through the state process. And so it would be up to Kenny or yourselves to
Letter, who did it come from?
The city.
for the division of the land, for
So
the,
I got notified of the division of the land, but I did not get notified of the shelter housing because you guys passed it through originally as a CUP code. But my question is, yeah.
Sure.
So going back to, I mean, I don't agree with all that, but that's besides. So the other part of this is these code amendments that you guys are doing and that you're going to be talking about and discussing today. In reading through it, I didn't have time to fully digest all of it, but it looked to me like the amount of units that can be counted as dwelling units. And my assumption would be these pallet homes or these shelter homes would fall in this too, because they're a dwelling unit. No,
N-
we have a different set of code provisions that apply to sheltered housing.
okay, but even at that, just looking at it, and I look at this like for a entire city issue because this will impact the entire city. And I want to stress too that I understand that the state is doing this for a housing crisis thing, but we also as a city need to plan for people who want to be out of the city and not in high density and zoned areas. And I haven't seen a whole lot that does not close together houses. And so I don't know what the plan is for that in the future. But when I'm looking at this, and maybe I read it wrong, but it looked like 17 units could go on an acre. That's a lot. I mean, I can honestly, I can't even picture that. That's huge. Yeah.
Well, that's 17 units per acre is actually something that has been in the code for a long time. Those aren't changes that we're making now. What we are addressing specifically in this discussion item is how we determine where that acre of measurement begins and ends.
Yeah.
Right. So 17, okay, for your specific example, 17 units per acre. Okay, does that mean that you can fit, what's 17 divided by 2? 8, 7, 8.5. Does that mean you can have 8 units on 0.49 acres, or do you have to have 8 units on 0.51 acres? That line has been a little bit grayed and a little bit fuzzy, and how some of the and how the code is written now.
Yeah.
So we're establishing a more clear boundary where that begins and ends.
Okay.
Chair Cornett,
That's-
I'm just gonna jump in. I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Terrific. I just wanted to jump in and mention that the public comment portion of the agenda for this meeting and for city council meetings, meetings of the city's governing bodies is specifically for addressing matters that do not later appear on the agenda. It seems to me that the focus of this conversation has now shifted to a matter, well, the exclusive matter that is appearing later on this agenda. And so with that in mind, my advice would be to end the public comment portion of this meeting to the extent that it continues discussing an item that is appearing later on this agenda.
But I,
Just
I
wanted to
think
chime in.
I think I should be able to get clarification on things. And I appreciate you giving me clarification because I'm not legal like Mr. Kara. And so I don't understand the legal terms on things. And so putting it in layman's, I appreciate that. And I think other people that are on the calls or on the Zoom want to understand what's going on too.
I think-
So I appreciate it.
but I think
Just to the extent that I can
he's
just
not
wrap
saying
up.
that you're not gonna have a voice. He's just saying that it should be part of the later part of the agenda when we're talking about something on the agenda.
Mhm.
To the-
And Chair,
uh,
Just a procedural
Just,
comment.
just to say, we have a presentation prepared, so we will be providing some good, I hope, in lay people's terms, a description of what the proposal is on PowerPoint, so you can listen in and we welcome your comments at that time, but really, as our city attorney said, comments now are for things not on the agenda.
And I would like to just say one last thing in response to that. This commission is composed of members that are, as you say, lay people that address very complicated legal issues, but are also is filled with volunteers that are dedicating their time to improving their community. And part of that involves reading the agenda packet, which is sent out in advance of this meeting. In this case, it was sent out 7 days in advance, which provides commissioners and members of the public with ample opportunities to contact staff with any questions like yours tonight, Ms. Dewey. And so to the extent that you think that there is not enough time to read it, that's simply not true. There's a week in advance notice.
No, I never said there was not enough time. I mean,
Okay.
I
Well,
can
for what it's
appreciate
worth.
that.
Yeah, you bet.
And I can
And for what
appreciate
it's
that I have a
worth,
job as well too, but I don't
Sure.
appreciate coming in, asking questions and then being belittled by you. All I
Not being
need is,
belittled.
I'm just asking questions. Everybody has been more than gracious and
Sure.
it's been good. So I just wanted clarification and I appreciate that. You guys are giving me clarification. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you bet. And not to be belittling. I'm sorry if that's how you feel.
I do appreciate it.
Okay,
And
wonderful.
for the specific West 7th thing about what's going on there, just ask the plan department because that's not even going to hit this table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to know how this text amendment and what you're doing will impact that and the reason why I ask it is because when I did talk to Mr. Lapointe, he indicated that maybe down the road, maybe they might do something like low income housing and stuff. And this would impact that if it was permanent low income housing. And so I wanted to know how that's going to look if that's the case down the road, because if it is, then it would go into something like that as well. And this would be pertinent to that.
Yeah, it would. But at this point, it's such a hypothetical. We can't.
Right. But when it sets a precedent, I mean, whatever you're doing sets precedent for whatever gets built in the future, because this is the code. So that's why I just wanted clarification on that and what it meant.
Chair Cornett, real quick too, just so we can get into the presentation, another clarification on this. This will not impact that property because that property is zoned commercial. Everything that we're talking about tonight is for residentially zoned properties. So it will have no impact whatsoever on the property that you're talking about.
That's what I meant.
And it sounds like you've already talked to Mr. Lapointe. I would encourage you to keep in touch with him because I have found him on other matters where I had similar concerns as what you're voicing to be very collaborative, very transparent. He's a great guy who really wants to do well for the city. So I have found him to be very open to listen. To.
Yeah, and I agree that everybody has their own jobs and what they want to do and what their view is. I just want to know how, because you guys do the planning and the codes and all that stuff, and that's what sets everything up. And then we have to work within those constraints, right? And so I want to make sure that I understand what the constraints are and how it's going to impact in the future and what's going on there, because like wherever it is, whatever is going on, it's going to impact the entire city. And so that's just what my concern is. And I want to have a clear understanding of it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I asked the questions, and it's just to get a broad sense of for
which is
everybody.
Fair enough. And you are right. I mean, there is a concerted effort to increase density
Mhm.
because we have very hard, unlivable urban boundary area lines. And we know that the city's going to grow. So we already have a housing crisis. So yes, there's lots of efforts going on to try and use the land we have in a more efficient way for affordable housing.
Yeah.
All kinds of housing.
And I appreciate that too, but one last thing and then I'll be done. One thing I want to have you guys remember too when you're doing this, and I run into this as an employer and when I'm trying to recruit people into town, I'm sure you run into it as a realtor, that people want, they come out of the cities because they want the country. They want that feel. And so if we do something for the low income and for the high density, we should also do something for the not low income and the not high density people too. And don't forget that area because it's super important and it's what draws people into the area.
Yeah.
But what you're doing right now is solving the problem for the area now, but the other is also what draws them in.
Yeah. Of which there is plenty of movement and effort along that line. It
just doesn't get brought out.
Kind of takes care of itself. It doesn't need a lot of support because
Yeah.
people find,
Well, nobody wants high rent. They just want high space. So,
was saying, yeah.
Well,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think that was our only member of the public. So we will, but that's good that we have public actually showing up to the meetings. That's awesome. So let's move on to the next item, item 8, discussion item. First review of land use and development ordinance text amendments to clarify regulations relating to residential density. Clarifications requested by the Plan Commission in winter 2022. Mr. Chandler, will you please get us rolling on that?
Yeah, thank you. Joshua Chandler, Community Development Department. I'm going to share my screen here real quick for you. All right, so the only item tonight is discussing density code amendments that the staff has taken a look at. As mentioned, there was some direction from the Planning Commission in winter of this year in February to take a look at density and how it is in our code. The density, as you see in the staff report, little blurb, density is an integral part of land use planning. It is something that, the ability to expand boundaries that we were talking about earlier, the urban growth boundary, it's needed for municipalities to monitor growth and capacity within the urban growth boundary to allow for possible expansions in the future. I'm currently in the Dallas Municipal Code. There's some confusion. We have a comprehensive plan density range in all residential zones. And then there's also something called minimum density. The comprehensive plan density ranges have been in the code since the code was adopted in 1998. The minimum density was something that was added into the code in 2011. As you'll see in later slides, they somewhat conflict with each other. There was, when they were adopted back in 2011, there wasn't, the city contracted out with a consultant and there wasn't a lot of background in how to apply this minimum density. And it hasn't really been consistently enforced until just about 2020, which has created some, contention with, different past applications. One of them to keep in mind is a minor partition 401-21, which we came in front of you back in February. And this was appeal to the city denying the application as a result of the proposal exceeding the maximum density by only 600 square feet. February 10th was the night that we were directed to take a closer look at it. Staff dug into our code, and I want to, give a shout out to our associate planner, Caitlin Cook, as well, the two of us really kind of took a crack at it. And the following slides here are going to be what are laid out as those proposed code amendments. So some things that changed. There was some definitions that needed to be, well, first of all, ADUs. We've been permitting ADUs for a while now, but there wasn't an actual definition of an ADU. So that was something that's added in. And also with ADUs and duplexes, as you'll see later on, these amendments clarify density counts for each of them. One thing you'll see in a lot of these slides is net acre or net area is proposed to replace gross density or gross area, and more discussion on that later on. But you'll see most of the amendments apply that we're proposing apply to the changing from gross acre to net acre. So in calculating density, there is something called we needed to highlight in here the truncation and also this threshold at 0.5 for rounding. And currently there's no language in the code regarding truncation, and truncation is basically the shortening or cutting off. So rounding numbers to decimal points is really what it is. Currently in the code, the minimum requirements of something are always rounded up. So the example I'm using here, 11.053 is rounded up to 12, believe it or not. This was the case in that February 10th Planning Commission meeting for another application that came forward for a reduction in parking, where they had their calculations came out to 11.053 rounded up to 12. So one whole entire parking space was required because of this rounding up. And then when you look at the maximum allowed density, that is the number that's always rounded down. And to jump back to that minor partition we just talked about, the calculation for that proposal came out to 2.88, almost 3 units allowed, but we rounded that entire thing down. So 0.88, that 0.88 basically made it so this individual could not divide into 3 and had to settle with dividing into 2. What's proposed in our code is a truncation to the 0.5 decimal point, or excuse me, 2 numbers past the decimal point. So as you can see here, 3.4289 would be rounded to 3.42. And then rounding is at 0.5. So your example here, 2.49, you would round down to 2. 2.50 would be rounded up to 3. So that kind of Commissioner Popoff, this is something that you actually pointed out in that meeting. So
How do you know when to truncate and when to round? Like, why would if you go back one slide, why would the 34289 not be 343? Since it's an 8.
And that's probably what it should have been. My mistake there. It should be 3.43 in a case like that.
So it's basically rounding.
Yeah, basic rounding there. My apologies. And in calculating density, another thing is touching on the density denominator. So this is basically making sure that it's clear how density is calculated, and it's based on an entire proposed area of land. There was questions in the minor partition we previously discussed. Should that density be calculated by the tract of land, the neighborhood, the subdivision? When to clearly define that as basically, if you are proposing to divide one parcel of land, you would calculate your density based off that one parcel of land, nothing else. There is some code in here for showing how to get to net area, which I guess I'm out. My slides are a little out, but we'll touch on net area and gross area. But to get to net area, it's there's different land constraints for calculating net area. These are them listed here. I won't go through all of them, but I can come back and we could chat about it later. But basically, net area. When calculating net area, you take the gross area of land and you would remove all these constraints for your calculation.
Basically usable land.
Exactly.
And I just wanted to make a quick comment on that. We found when we did some research that state law really recognizes net density much more than gross density. So it just seemed a lot more consistent to use that definition.
Josh, do you just want us to let you get through the presentation before we make comments?
Yeah, if we could,
Yeah,
just to
alright.
keep it flowing. And then I can always come back to any of the slides, no problem. So here, looking at minimum density and maximum density, and this is basically just the calculation showing how you got there. And what it is it's that, you're taking your figure there. I just used basically 1/1 for this to be easy and get us to whole numbers instead of dealing with any fractions right now. But basically what it is you're going to take the 43,560, that's an acre of land, but that would be your proposal, whatever your proposal is, that would be the figure that you start with. You divide that by an acre of land in square feet to get whatever it breaks down to as an acre. You multiply that by whatever the minimum density is called out in the code. And that would give you your minimum on the top, the same, similar calculation for maximum density. So in regulating density, we look at, for ADUs and duplexes. For minimum density, duplexes are considered as 2 dwelling units. ADUs would be considered as 1 dwelling unit. And for maximum density, duplexes are considered 1 dwelling unit, ADUs 0 dwelling units. Minimum lot allowances. This is another thing that we discussed during that meeting in February. Regardless of the density calculation, any residentially zoned lot of land is allowed at least 1 dwelling unit. And then also any residentially zoned land has an anticipated density of at least 1 dwelling unit. So this was a conversation that we had that if an individual were to divide, let's say their density was 3 for 3 dwelling units, they were to divide 3 pieces of land and keep one of those keep one parcel open for open space. That wouldn't work because we have to assume that at some point that could change hands and that person could build on it. So therefore you're exceeding the density of the overall parcel. So this should have been earlier on. So apologies on that, but getting into the definition of gross and net density. I'm going to have some slides after this that's going to, some pictures so it's easier for us to take a look at it. But gross density is the number of residential units per overall acre. And net density is the number of units per acre of land, which excludes various constraints that I listed earlier. So massive slopes, wetlands, as you mentioned, Commissioner Mosher, the usable land is really what net looks at. And then staff is proposing, as mentioned earlier, removing gross entirely within the Dallas Municipal Code and replacing that measurement with net. So here's some examples. Hopefully, well, the lines are kind of clear there, but this is showing some land in town that basically there is, as you can see, some cutouts in. Yeah, you can see this area here is basically right-of-way land that has already been dedicated. So through a land division, right-of-way, if there's an intended right-of-way to go through a parcel of land, that area of land is to be dedicated to the city for future right-of-way. So in this case, looking gross density would be that overall a piece of land, whereas net density would be just the area in blue because you're going to remove your right-of-way. The right-of-way will be dedicated. So some examples of how this applies when you're looking at this property happens to be off 9th Street. So a big cliff face on the back side of it. So this would be gross density, whereas net density, this is the area that could actually be built on. Easily, more easily be built on, let's say that. And then the other is an example of our stream corridor and floodplain. Those are the 2 different shades of blue here. This is gross density. This would be net density. So as you can see from those examples, it's basically one thing that we have ran into is we have something, I'll touch on it more, is called a shadow plat, and that's showing a development of a property. When a land division comes in, you need to submit a shadow plat. That shadow plat is supposed to demonstrate how you can meet your density. But when you're dealing with a case like this, let's throw out the number of 5 units for gross density. That means you would have to show how 5 units, dwelling units, can be built on that in an area ultimately that can't be built on. So it's not very practical from what we found.
Like my lot.
It's very close. Yeah, it's in your neighborhood. So then look at the different density ranges. The Dow's comprehensive plan, currently, this is what's listed for all of them. But as you can see, the strike through there, as mentioned earlier, staff is proposing to replace gross with net. So instead of 3 to 6 units per gross acre, it would be per net acre. And the other thing is this minimum density that was added. So minimum density here for the RL zone it reads in the code, not more than 10,000 net buildable square feet per dwelling unit. If you do the math, you find out that they're conflicting, that the comprehensive plan minimum is 3, and then the minimum density is 4. This is if we're looking at just a flat acre of land. So basically your requirement, like I said, it's conflicting. So what really is the minimum density of that parcel? And that, is a question, and that's why we're, taking a look at it here. And the idea would be taking minimum density, that language, out of the code and basing everything on these ranges.
So Josh, are these changes gonna render a lot of developments outside of code? Because it's a pretty significant change in some cases.
I don't know if it would render them out of code per
And I imagine they would be grandfathered anyway.
in a sense that this would, we're discussing new changes for new development. Yeah. So in a case that, property may not meet current densities, properties all over town don't meet current densities, but it's a matter of when they want to redevelop their land is when they would have to comply with all these. Couple reminders in here, no proposed development may exceed the maximum net density. That's the thing we ran into with that partition appeal. And then in our residential zones, if a proposed development does not meet a minimum density, we will require a redevelopment plan to be submitted. That redevelopment plan would lay it out that all future development on those parcels would have to comply with this redevelopment plan unless a new plan is submitted to the city. And this redevelopment plan will be filed with Wasco County Clerk. So this redevelopment plan, it's a newly proposed article. It would be its own standalone article. Therefore, we would be able to apply it to land divisions as well as brand new homes being built. The requirements on what to include in a redevelopment plan are those that we're just copy and pasting from already our site plan review section, 10.3.030.030. And these are used to demonstrate how proposed development can still allow for the minimum density to be achieved. Currently, these are all required. As I mentioned earlier, these shadow plats, these are already required, but it's something that we've ran up against where an individual wants to buy a larger parcel of property and maybe only build one house on it. Then they come to us and we say, well, that doesn't meet density. So you kind of get to this crossroad of it. Is it a denial of an application or can we try to find a workaround? And the redevelopment plan we feel is a workaround for that. This is just another example of a property to kind of put redevelopment plans into perspective.
Sorry, can I just jump back in? Do you feel that the redevelopment plan is a workaround of that because the redevelopment plan allows for a minimum density of 1?
No, the redevelopment plan allows an individual to build and demonstrate how further density can be achieved, whether or not it's by them or whether it's by somebody that they sell that property to. And I'll show an example to kind of see. So this is a parcel over on the west side of town. It will have, we've already, as you can see to the side, there's already a piece of land that was dedicated to the city. And this is going to be a future right of way for 15th Street. And just basic numbers here, these are estimates, but it's most likely that the gross area of land, although we're not going to be using that anymore, is probably 5 dwelling units. When you add in the future right of way, well, actually, when you remove the land for the future right of way, it would probably come out to around 4 dwelling units. And I'm just using these numbers for reference. So looking at the two hypothetical developments of the land, the redevelopment plan would show a future right of way. And then also those other 2 lines would show how it can be divided into, 4 different size lots. And then it can show how a proposed dwelling will be built and still allow for future development of those properties.
Question about that. What about setbacks? How does that impact?
Setbacks would still be applied. This drawing is not to scale anywhere near, but you would have to show how the setbacks would work with, still allowing enough size for making sure that these areas that you set aside still meet in this case, the low density minimum lot size. You would then have to, if you're proposing this and to build here, you would have to show how you still meet these hypothetical setbacks in that case. So still allowing, there is still some flexibility, but what it does is it avoids a scenario like this happening, where this would not allow for the future right of way to punch through. This would make it so almost, obviously nothing is to scale here, but it would make it difficult or may not even happen, meeting those densities that are prescribed for that lot. And yeah, sorry, there wasn't a check and there wasn't a check for good. So that's what we get.
Everybody liked it.
Yeah, good. Lighten the mood maybe. So then some next steps would be addressing any changes that you may have with the proposed code amendments. Then proceeding after that, putting everything together, proceeding with formal land use application. We would work with our legal department to determine if a measure 56 is required. A measure 56 is a state requirement sent out to make sure that properties that are being impacted by a legislative change are notified of the change. Notices after that would be sent to DLCD and Wasco County, and then we would have future legislative public hearings with you as well as City Council for the final adoption. And Alice.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm really proud of Josh and Caitlin for leaning into this project. And it was really in response to the frustration that you were all feeling with the Whiteman appeal that occurred a few months back. And then also staff has been really experiencing a lot of heartache, I would say, and a lot of difficulty with unclear code sections. So this will vastly improve. They don't change densities or anything like that, but they do clarify the code requirements and make it, I think, more fair for everyone involved and more clear. And I think that's good for our customers in the long run. We really want to hear your good comments because you were the ones pushing us to do this and to get it done as soon as we could. So we welcome any comments that you have.
Quick question, if just
Yeah,
to
for it.
this next steps 1 through 5, addressing necessary changes, let's say it bounces around for 2 meetings. What's the anticipated timeline on making this and whatever changes we come up with actual code?
That's a tough question with recent changes in our office. We're going to be down. As you know, we we are already down one staffer, and then Alice will be leaving in 3 weeks. I hope to continue moving everything at a steady pace. You know, we have to be mindful of our bandwidth.
Like 6 to 12 months.
I would say within 6.
Okay.
I would think.
Just to like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been something that Caitlin and I have racked our heads against the wall on so many of these things. As Alice mentioned, this is not something that's changing density. This is something that's cleaning up the process. We've had contentious conversations with people trying to develop their property, people that have been developing in the Dalles. And now we have these things, as mentioned, this minimum density. Density has not really been, it's been so wishy-washy over the years until, you know, really Alice came and we realized that we needed to, you know, start enforcing something that's already in our code. But when you have two things in the code that are so confusing and contradict each other, it's really difficult for everybody involved. So we're hoping to move it through as fast as we can. I'll say that.
okay. This question may seem elementary. Maximum density, we all know what that is. Why is there a minimum density?
A minimum density is to, in the case of let's say a 1 acre parcel in high density.
Okay.
If you don't have a minimum density, then you basically, the minimum for 1 acre, the minimum density in the high density zone is 10 units per acre.
Okay.
You allow an individual to build 1 on that acre, and that continues to happen. The support of ever having an urban growth boundary, it would be very low.
Okay,
Because basically we would be using up our land inefficiently.
so this is where the concept of a redevelopment plan, where it's like, hey, you have an acre, you want to build a house, it needs to be here, and you need to show where you can achieve minimum density throughout the acreage over infinity.
Correct, exactly. And that's why it was something that we felt the need to have, you know, really, the redevelopment plan is already in our code, but it only applies to land divisions. So what this is doing is this is taking it out of the land division section so we can apply it to houses. Because we have had conversations with people looking at lots of land. We have maybe some pieces of land that it could probably be downzoned, honestly, because we have an abundance of high density land in the city of the Dalles, and some of those pieces of land are quite large. An individual may want to come in. It feels like a rural setting, maybe in the neighborhood that they're at. Or, you know, in the case of 9th Street, we always use 9th Street as an example of something with such severe slope on 9th Street, where an individual maybe just wants to build 1 house, and we would effectively have to tell them, no, they cannot do that because you do not meet density. So,
Okay,
So,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
so just to understand that right, so if I do have an acre and I just want to build 1 family home on there, I could do that as long as I position it such that sometime in the future, more homes could be built on that acre.
correct.
Okay, so I'm not forced to put X number of homes on that acre. I'm just forced to position it such that sometime presumptively in the future, it could be.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just an example, we had a gentleman, a really nice piece of property on 13th or 14th that somebody called about, and I had ridden my bike right by it the previous day. It has incredible views, and I was looking at that piece of ground saying, wow, that's really neat. A house that's maybe 40 years old, but it's just perfectly situated on the lot. As happenstance, somebody called the next day and said, we would like to divide that property for our family members for the future, for our future heirs who will inherit this property. And they were asking about possibilities for that. And the way this house was positioned, it might allow for some of that. So I think what's great about this is it will create opportunities for people to live in a low density fashion if they choose, but also have an opportunity for building some family wealth and also achieving our density goals for the city. We need to, if we ever want to be able to make a case for moving our urban growth boundary, and I know we do, we have had historically wanted to do that, we have to show the state that we're using our land efficiently. So having these codes in place kind of is the best of both worlds.
Do you guys mind if I just keep it going? I have two other things I just want to, for section 6.170.020 calculating density, and then section D, minimum lot allowances. Item B, it says any residentially zoned lot of record has an anticipated density of at least one dwelling unit. We talked about this. Can we just remove the word anticipated and just so it just says has a density of one dwelling unit or at least one dwelling unit?
Yeah, I don't see an issue with it.
Okay, it just seems less room for. Yeah, you get it.
Yeah. And we also, after we take in these comments, we'll also, run this through our legal department to make sure it all, reads correctly too. But in a case like this, we won't change the substance.
Okay, another thing that I had was in that same section, section B, deductions to calculate net area. So net area is total area of land within individual development, excluding the following areas measured in square feet. And the thing I have a question about is all the other ones make sense, but public utility easements, let's say I have whatever size lot and it's a rectangle, runs north-south, and on the north boundary line, there's a road, and then there's a 20-foot wide public utility easement, running outside of the right of way, and there's that utility easement. That land could be used for yard space, a driveway can go underneath it. Why can't that public utility easement space be used for that density?
Well, in the case that you couldn't put a dwelling on it.
Okay. Because I mean, that burns up a lot of space. And if it's one of those things where, okay, so like, well, I'll just say that lot that I have on Lincoln Way, right? If I could use a personal, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to use a personal thing. So it's fairly wide east and west. And then there is a public utility easement that's like, I mean, it's wide, it's wider than normal. I feel like it's like 30 or 40 feet wide. And then after that, there's another, I think it's like 15 feet that is essentially inaccessible because it's a little bit of a slope and the public utility easement. So let's say, and I'm not doing this, but let's say I want to divide that north and south like this and make 3 very wide east-west pieces. I feel like that public utility easement could be used in 2 different ways. Like I could put a driveway all along underneath that so that everything could be accessed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, I mean, I'm not doing that, and that lot doesn't really allow for that, but there are other lots like that. If there's an advantage to being able to use that space while achieving our density, shouldn't we be able to do that? I mean, you can't drive in a stream, you can't build in a stream, you can't drive on a slope, you can't build on a slope.
Right. I mean, that is a good point, but one thing we looked at was something we have here called residential rear lot development, where it's basically the Dow's version of a flag lot. If y'all are familiar with a flag lot, we don't really do flag lots here in the Dow's. We do something called residential rear lot development, which means if you would like to go back to that appeal that we discussed in February, it was 3 lots stacked on each other. He had on the side was required 25-foot easement on the side from the front all the way to the back to access it. That land we look at as that cannot be used for dwelling space. So as a result, it would need to be removed. So basically, it's just the fact that it cannot be used for dwelling space, so it shouldn't be included in the calculation. Just similar to a slope, similar to a floodplain.
Okay.
If they cannot be used for the dwelling.
Because Cody's right.
There's,
It can't be used for development, but it can be used for some of the stuff that's necessary around the development.
yeah, some of the stuff that you have,
Right, like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I have a public utility easement that has power lines above it, they're 30 feet in the air. And let's say that if you calculate the net density, remove that, I don't have enough space for parking. But if that public utility easement was included in the net density, then I would be able to fit that. I mean, like, what if it's that close and the lot is set up that way? Would that just be an appeal to planning commission? Do you think? Like if it came down to that one thing?
So you're more so talking that if you were to put that a public utility easement would potentially impact the maximum amount of units you could put on the lot.
Yep, exactly.
By what's actually buildable, but setbacks.
Right.
all that.
I mean, it may take it some additional discussion on our end. And we basically looked at it just because it's kind of it's an example used in some other cities on how to calculate net area. Public utility easements are used. Some of them include private utility easements, which we took out of there because we felt that a private utility easement, if an individual wants to, let's say, only build one house, they establish multiple private utility easements all over their property. So therefore they get it down to a point where you're only at one dwelling. But it's something we could take a closer look at. It definitely, a lot of these codes were taken from multiple different cities. So it's kind of a mashup of a lot of different I think the city of Molalla, LeGrand, Milwaukee provided some context for the rounding section, for instance. So we'd be happy to take a closer look at it.
Yeah, I think those circumstances would be unique, and probably few and far between. But if you have a 50 by 100-foot lot and you have a 50-foot wide or 20-foot wide utility easement going across 50 feet of it, that's 1,000 square feet burned up that you can't use anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. We could look into it more
That may be very usable.
yeah, or we could just, I guess if we have a consensus, if we want to just nix it out of the calculation altogether.
It's what?
Utility easements.
I think that requires another look.
Okay.
See, is there some kind of in between, is it two categories of the aspects that need to be minused from the total net acreage? Is there, so there's things like slope and floodplain, that's just a no-go. But then are there some like utilities, and then it may even depend on what kind of utilities they are, that allow for inclusion, knowing that they can't be used to actually put a residence on them, but some of the auxiliary stuff around it, setback, driveway, stuff like that. I don't know if that, I mean, it does make it more complicated, but it's true that there may be cases where it's necessary to have a provision for that.
Yeah, we can take a look.
Advantageous. Those are the two items I just wanted to touch on, so. If someone else wanted to.
I just had some general questions. You mentioned in the packet, you talked about feedback from prospective applicants, and then you talked about just including what you've heard from other folks. And when we met in February and heard from the Whiteman case, a lot of what I heard was there was people outside of the planning department who were advising on the code, which we know not great. But I'm just curious if you've asked those people, invited those people in to look at these proposals, or will they be included in feedback before we get to the point of public hearing? Because I would just love to have our regular users really, and even the applicant provide feedback on this, because I think that it sounded like it was Tennyson Engineering, I think, was the one they cited specifically. That is one outfit in town that seems like everybody uses. So inviting those folks in to have that feedback before we get much further along. So is there plans for that? And then is there plans for that? But then also, once this is passed, how is this then going to be communicated to the users proactively? And because I think that what happened with the Whiteman case, they felt like it was a gotcha situation. Whether or not that is actually true, that's what they felt. So how is the planning commission, with the capacity you guys do have, do some proactive outreach to ensure that situations like that don't happen again?
Yeah, one piece that may happen with outreach is the Measure 56 that I mentioned. And we would have to see if a Measure 56 is going to be required. That's when an impact happens from a legislative change. If it impacts a property, there's a threshold, then they would be notified. When we did our housing code amendments, for instance, that impacted every single residentially zoned property in the entire city. So we sent out a mailer of 6,000 plus addresses. Regarding this meeting, unfortunately, this item was delayed a little bit more than we wanted. I had conversations with Tennyson a while ago about it, but unfortunately have not touched base again. We are correct. I mean, we work with Tennyson nonstop on these things. And, unfortunately, I think some of these have been frustrating to them, operating a certain way for a while, and then to kind of come in and steer the course a little has been frustrating. And not only for them, but I think for us. But we have not specifically reached out to either of them. I kind of feel that right now was our rough draft, able to get in front of you, and more than happy to reach out. I mean, it's sounding like we probably want another planning commission meeting, another wrap up of everything. And at that time, we'll be more than happy to contact not only Tennyson, but our other local surveyors, engineers, so they can be a part of the process.
Yeah, I think being able to take this packet and digest it for the next 2 weeks or whenever this would appear on the agenda again, so that if we do have any additions or thoughts or change or whatever, general questions, we could do that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I know Caitlin and Josh can list a dozen applicants, customers that we deal with a lot who are dividing property a lot. And I think that's a great idea, is to get kind of a focus group. That's something we can do, and get drafts out and ask for their opinions ahead of time before it goes to hearing. So it's a great idea. We'll do it.
I'm just not a technical expert. They are, and they're the user. So I mean, I think ultimately what I heard from that hearing was there was conflict within the technical experts. So if we're truly doing this to make things clear and objective while also encouraging development, I think that we have to include the experts in this conversation, because
Exactly. Yeah. And, not to hit on it again, but as mentioned, that, density's been in our code, since 1998, but then minimum density was added in 2011 during a periodic review of our entire code. And the consultant, I would have to say, didn't really provide too much context into how to apply minimum density per se. So it has inconsistently been applied, and we are trying to right the wrong, really, and steer the ship and get us all on the right page moving forward, so there's no confusion going forward with this. That's why we want to be clear and objective, and that's why I think you'll find I think that some of these code amendments are some of those obvious ones when you look at and you think, well, why is this even in there? I think those obvious ones can create some confusion if we don't clearly spell them out.
Do you have any other?
No.
Commissioner Portela, do you have any comments, thoughts, things like that?
No, it's been kind of beautiful. Every time I thought of a question, it was just magically answered. So
That's a good group.
yeah, it's good. Way to go, guys.
I think in that case, if you've completed your presentation, I think we've completed everything that we need to discuss at this point. Let's move on from this item.
Chair,
Yes.
we did get a question, and we don't normally have public comment during a work session item, but the participant behind me, Ms. Dewey, has one question. I wondered if you'd allow her to make comment.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
So I was just
Yeah,
So thanks.
problem.
When you're doing that redevelopment plan, I like the fact that it allows you to be able to do the high density and to take it into a low density to one unit. But how does that protect the person? Like if you're doing, so if there's a subdivision or something where there's people have put their house on there and gone through the redevelopment plan where they can add later on.
Divide later on.
Yeah, if they wanted to, but doing that because they only want one single unit, but they have to do it within these confines. How does that protect the person that goes in and purchases a piece of property that's adjacent to it or next to it that does not want a high density and goes in there? Do you, in those scenarios, would you do something like and I'm just thinking as I'm talking about, would you do something like an HOA that would protect that? Or how does that get protected for that as well?
So if I could just answer this is a subjective question. So this is a
Huh.
personal answer, right?
Okay.
So when you're buying property, the buyer needs to be aware of what kind of neighborhood they're buying in, what that zoning is, and be up to speed on what could possibly happen around them.
Yeah, but so does this make it, I guess my concern is this is going to be blanketed across the whole town, right? The whole city. And so is there going to be sections where they can you do things that would allow that for if somebody wanted to come in and do a section and have it spaced out? Because some people will pay more to have nobody right next to them. And then, but I would I would hate if I did that to have somebody go in and then divide it down the road, And so if there was something like that, how does that? And it's just a question to think about when you're going through this, because you guys are going to be talking and approving on this stuff. How do you protect that person that doesn't want that in that area that's not developed like that currently from their future investment,
So I would say that, to a certain degree, if someone is doing a minor partition that is making 3 new parcels or less, that is done. It's a ministerial process. Staff just says, okay, you're dividing it into 3. If someone is doing a subdivision, like, hey, we're going to bang out a brand new subdivision here. We're going to add 4 or more units, then it goes out to public notice and those things can be contested. However, the things that you are asking about are things that already exist in our code. Like it's zoning. Like there is no protection. It's already happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is,
But I'm saying,
just by the fact that you have high density zoning, medium density zoning, and low density zoning, that's ultimately what you're talking about. There are certain parts of town where you can develop denser than in certain other parts. Other than that, as long as you stick to those rules, there's nothing to prevent your neighbor from developing to the maximum allowable density.
okay.
There's nothing you can.
And maybe I just need to get more clarification and I can ask you out later because I don't want to take up your time on this. But I want a clear understanding of how that works for future, just because as a normal citizen, when you're going to buy something, like you want to know what you're buying and you want to know how it's going to be protected. You know what I mean?
I think that anyone who's buying anything with open space around them should assume, since population is increasing across the planet, that there will be houses there.
Especially in.
Just assume it. Like I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean,
No, I know what you're saying, but I'm like, oh my gosh, then you're never going to get any land without getting out in the middle of nowhere.
well, it would also be your opportunity to buy it when it becomes available.
Okay.
Yeah. I
I know what you're saying. And I'm not being sarcastic when I laugh. I'm like, that's a lot of money. Like if somebody was doing that. So anyway, that was just a question and I can ask you all this stuff later because it's not pertinent. I don't want to take up your time.
Well,
Okay.
well, Chair, just to clarify, the people that want to live in open space areas with a lot of space, they need to choose in areas that are zoned low density residential in the city of the Dalles. Or they should build in the county where there is really indeed low density. And there are a lot of areas in this county, I mean, just outside the city that are low density.
Oh yeah.
So it's not like other cities where you can't find open land. There is a lot of open land outside the city.
Right. And I've seen it in the counties and stuff, but in the city, I don't know. I just personally don't know what is from looking what's low density. You know what I mean? But that's not for this. I mean, I can ask you guys all this stuff later.
But there's a
And I was just thinking,
that shows what's low, medium and high.
yeah, and I don't think anybody really cares to do like, unless you're really looking to do something like that, you're not going to look for that, right? I'm just saying, like, when somebody buys something, how do they get protected that it's going to, if they want it to stay the same as it is, how do they ensure in their head what they're buying is there? And what you're saying is go to the low density zone places, and then that would ensure it versus the other.
This thing shows what zone it is in. So it'll say RL, ML, or HL.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, well, I'll talk. I mean, I was just curious, and I didn't mean to take up your time, but I wanted to ask that since you're talking about the redevelopment on there, like how that works.
Yeah.
And I'm only doing it because I assume other people are watching that don't know too. So
It's good questions, but
yeah, I'll ask you later.
sounds good.
Help anytime.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. Discussion item complete. May we move on to staff comments and project updates?
Well, this all happened quickly. This is my last planning commission meeting as the director. I will continue on. The plan is to have me continue on for till the end of the calendar year, managing the day-to-day operations of urban renewal. My position at the Wasco County is half-time, so I'll have time available to continue to help the urban renewal program and also provide advice to Josh as he takes on the interim role as needed. If he needs help with anything, I'm here to help. And that means I may be back here at a meeting or two. So this is likely to not be the last time you'll see me. Though I just wanted to say, because I have the floor now and I get to say this. I am so impressed with this commission. The smarts, the enthusiasm for the livability of this community is really evident with all of you. And I know that Whiteman appeal was a particularly difficult hearing, but what was so impressive about that hearing to me was just we were all having to think deeper than we have in a long time about livability and about some very sophisticated concepts around density and think them through and also say, gosh, this is a troubling piece of code. We need to make it better. And I'm just really impressed with all of you and your ability to see that and to push for us to constantly do better. I'm really pleased with our addition of Nick Portella and Maria Pena to the board as well, and everything that they bring and the enthusiasm that they bring to this group. We have one vacancy, so if you have any ideas about some more folks that might be good candidates, you can always tell us. We can tell the mayor, or you can reach out directly to the mayor, Mayor Rich Mays, and give him those ideas. He's been out recruiting people to join the commission. So I hope we can add someone soon, because it's always really difficult and stressful for us to not know if we have a quorum. So with that in mind, Josh and I were talking about future meetings in August. We have an application that we believe could be ready for one of the August meetings. And we know that's a heavy vacation time. So August 4th and August 18th are the two meeting dates. And we wanted to find out if you have any conflicts that you know of now, and if we'll have quorums on one or both days.
So we're not having a meeting in July? No more meetings
Our
in July?
plan is to not have a meeting in the second meeting in July, because I wanted to seize the opportunity. I knew that we would have a quorum at this meeting, so
Okay,
we
cool.
moved it ahead.
I'm not available August 4th.
You're not available.
I have no conflicts.
I have no conflicts.
Not sure I can
August-
plan that far ahead.
August 4th and 18th is what you said, or
Yes, those are Thursdays, of course.
I'm good. I'm good for both.
Okay. And did I hear, Mr. Portella, did you say you're available on both dates? Okay.
Oh, I'm good.
Oh, you're
Sorry.
good on both. I thought
Yeah,
you
I'm
had
good
a
on both, sorry.
conflict. Okay, so we just have on August 4th. And we can check in with Commissioner Pena as well about that. So thank you. That's a big help. The next hearing that the application that we have in front of us is the one I may have mentioned I think I mentioned at the last Planning Commission meeting. We have a conditional use permit application for a taller building, a downtown redevelopment at the block on 3rd Street between Laughlin and Jefferson. It's the former Griffith Motors property, and that is a proposal to have ground floor commercial and 4 levels of housing above. So this will be a two-part conditional use permit / site review. The first request that requires the hearing is a request to go. The code allows a conditional use permit application between 55 feet and 75 feet. 75 feet is the max. And this request, I think, is 8 feet or 5 feet taller. So it's 60 feet where 55 is the minimum, or that anything in that category needs to go for a conditional use. So you'll be reviewing that. Again, it's not the full site review. The site review will come in, and that'll be a staff level decision, which is part 2 of this. And which is appealable to the commission. So you won't be getting into a lot of details. It will be primarily the height only.
That height thing isn't just a variance, isn't just a percentage variance that you can just okay.
Our code requires conditional use for these, and it isn't a variance. And what I like about that is it's variance criteria is kind of hard to meet. And this is more looking at the livability and kind of how impacts it might have to adjacent properties.
Got it.
So the criteria don't directly address height, so it's a little bit awkward, but it allows you some discretion to look at livability a little differently than you might if you were just looking strictly at variance criteria.
Got it.
That's interesting. And the RV park that was canceled last time, is that coming back or is that off the charts?
It'll come back, we believe, at some point. We are meeting with the applicants tomorrow to discuss some details on it. So at this point, there is nothing planned.
And I kind of lastly, we had 2 hearings for long range items that came before you in June. And those were for the buildable land inventory for employment land, and then the total maximum daily load, the stream corridor. Those have been delayed getting to city council. I just wanted to give you an update. Those will go September 15th. The council takes a break in August. So that's why the break. And some of that was short staffing. Some of it was just, we had full agendas, and these aren't particularly time sensitive. So it's okay to delay them. I just wanted you to know about that. Urban Renewal Incentive Program. I've talked to Commissioner Aparicio, and some of you have had questions about this. The commission, as I mentioned last time, the Urban Renewal Board approved the incentive program in May in concept. They put it on me as staff to present the materials that will be that the application, like the application material and the grant agreement, some of those things that are more administrative, the prep. I'm hoping to get those completed and to the commission in next week's Urban Renewal Board packet. So I do have the person who's helping me had a death in their family, so it might be delayed a little again. I'm going to hope and pray that doesn't happen. But what I'm encouraging everyone to do, so if you're wondering what's happening, Alice, I will say, please, anyone that you know of that's interested in getting a grant, have them reach out to us, because we won't award the grant until they have their land use approvals and building permits. So we want to make sure whatever money gets awarded is for something that will actually get built. So that's why, so they can just reach out to us and do a little bit of a pre-app discussion about their proposal. We can direct them on the right process for land use. And so I've gotten a lot of calls this week, and I appreciate Carly and others.
You do have people in the process.
Yes, that are interested. No one's applied yet because I don't have an application packet out yet. And so that's on me to get that finalized with someone who's helping me get that done. So stay tuned, but please do encourage people to reach out to us for some preliminary discussions about what they can and can't do, because they'll need to go through the land use process first.
Incidentally, has Tony Zelka talked to you about it?
He has, yes. I haven't heard from him in a few weeks, but I hope to hear from him soon. I thought he might be lined up first. Um, so, and then I think the future is bright here. I just am so pleased that Josh is going to be stepping in as interim, and we are short-staffed right now, and so there may be an opportunity to bring in some interim staffing to help with this staffing gap that we have now. So Josh and Matthew Klebs and I are going to be meeting Monday to talk some more about that. But really request your patience. We're going to do our very best to keep up with it. I'll be around on contract to help, though not as many hours as everyone else. So I'm just so happy to be working with Matthew in this time. He's our new city manager. He's really supportive of our work, and I trust will be getting us the resources we need here in the planning program to move forward positively. And I'm also just pleased that, Caitlin and Josh know this code so well. And I just think we're future's in good hands. So that's all I had to say.
Okay. Thanks, Alice. As a commissioner comment, yes, we are very happy that your tenure here has been well received, and we've enjoyed our time. And yes, Matthew Klebs is going to be great, and he's very responsive too, which I appreciate. So that's awesome. I don't have any beyond that. I don't have anything to say. So.
I did have one question. You mentioned the possible conditional use applicant next go round for the mixed use building. And you said it was going to be 100% commercial, which triggered the question of, did we ever settle what we decided to do or what the plan is for downtown with the first floor commercial use?
No, that project's been on hold, and I'm not happy about that. And so we'll talk to Josh about getting that scheduled. The one thing I do know, what I heard from the group when we talked about this, and I've been wanting to sit down with Commissioner Masher, who missed this work session that we had, and just get his take on it. But what I heard from the group is First Street, everyone's comfortable with maximum flexibility on First Street. And definitely want ground floor commercial along the Second Street portion to maintain that strong residential core along our main street in town. And then Third Street was the question mark as to whether flexibility of ground floor residential or commercial was appropriate. I think more people on this commission at the time in that discussion were preferred keeping ground floor commercial on Third Street. And all I would tell you is, for the most part, I think nearly 100%, if not 100% of the land use on the ground floor on Third Street is currently commercial. So the question is, do we want to allow flexibility for the market and not sometimes you end up with a lot of vacancies on the ground floor if you overdo it or over require ground floor commercial. So allowing that flexibility is good for investment purposes, but it needs to fit. So at the end of the day, that's what it'll be about, and we're going to be looking to you to help give us good guidance on that.
You have some ground floor residential down towards the hardware store, the backside of the hardware store
yeah.
on Third.
Mhm.
Those beautiful little old Victorians.
That's on 4th Street.
Oh, is that Fourth? Oh,
Yep. Yeah. So we will bring that back. I don't know when, but we had that nicely queued up, and Dawn Hurt had written those staff reports. So we just need to dust that off and get it moving again.
Cool. Anything else, gang?
Well, I noticed that the picture of the commission is reversed right to left. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. It's just sort of peculiar.
It's there to mess you up. It's there to make sure you're paying attention. Commissioner Portela, do you have anything to add?
I do not. Just thank you, Alice, for everything, and it's sad to see you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, gang.
It's been awesome.
Well, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you in August.
Now, if I could ask a question after I have the 5 minutes, I'm glad you let me.
Oh, yeah, of course. Glad you asked. Glad you came. All right.
Council. Allow public comment.